I'm Hannah Moore, CFP, a practicing financial planner and educator. I'm on a mission to change the way people think and talk about money. Let's get started. Today, I want to talk about what does it look like to plan for having a baby. So I am 35 weeks pregnant as I'm recording this. So this is really me living out exactly what I'm talking about here of how do you plan for having a baby financially? What does this look like? So there are certainly so many factors that go into this. But I want to get into the nitty-gritty of looking at this. So first of all, the first area of planning is going to be just really, really practically of looking at what does your monthly budget look like? And so this is going to be getting down to, okay, are you going to be taking leave? Which I hope you are if you're listening and watching this. That you take leave with your baby. So we're going to be taking leave, but what does that look like? And the first place that we're going to go for this is looking at what are your benefits packages if you're working for somebody. And I know that that's not the reality for a lot of people, but do you have short-term disability as an option? And if you do, what does it cover? What does it not cover? And getting into that nitty-gritty of that. Now, usually short-term disability covers 60% of your base salary if you have short-term disability. The key pieces that you're going to need to look for when you're looking at your disability policy is what is the term that you have to wait. Usually you have to wait a while before it'll kick in. And so figuring out what is that time frame, because it's not all policies as soon as you are disabled, which I kind of hate the fact that we're calling having a baby a disability. Like, I get it on one hand and kind of hate it on the other, but that's for a whole nother conversation. But really looking at, what is that policy? We call it like an elimination period. What is that period where you might not get anything until your disability policy kicks in? So looking at what that looks like. Does your company have paid maternity leave? If so, how long does this look like? What does that, getting really, really clear on what those numbers are is going to help you tremendously. One of the things that I have seen people struggle with is that their company doesn't pay for their leave at all. And so what they get stuck with is a bill for their health insurance premiums. So that is just going to be another thing for you to check with your employer of just making sure that, when I'm out on leave and if you're paying for my health insurance, like, do you continue to pay for my health insurance during that time? Because having that unexpected bill for health insurance can really it can just add to your costs when we don't want those surprises to be coming in. So be sure to ask about that from your employer if you are working right now. But looking at, what is it that you want? Thinking through this idea of what do you want your maternity leave to look like? And then making sure that your finances are going to support that. So this disability policy, kind of your work employer, how they're navigating this, that has a significant role to play. I'll tell you, in my maternity leaves, I've had 2 so far, about to go on my 3rd. One was wonderful. The other one was kind of a mess. And, but this time I'm being really intentional about what is it that I want? What is it that I need? But one thing I will say is that this is something that we just need to trust ourselves to adapt to. It could be that you get on maternity and you realize you need an extra month or something like that. And I just want to encourage you to, even as we're building these plans, to remain flexible in your plans as you're doing this. Okay, so getting really clear on where you're spending money. Budgeting is not always a favorite topic with people when I talk to them, but this is a time where it makes sense to really prioritize where is our money going, and look back. I often say go back 3 months and just categorize it. Look at what this is. There's some really great apps that are out there. If you have all of your accounts at one place, you can usually go to like your bank or whatever, and you can see exactly where their money is going. But really get clear about where is your money going, especially with knowing where your money is going to be coming from when you're on maternity leave, or if you're going to be not having that money. How much money do you need to be saving for your maternity leave? What does that look like? But then adding in the extra costs of babies, which can range tremendously. I remember before I had kids, I was like, you know what? You can do this really cheap. We can make this really, really affordable. It does not have to be expensive. And that is very true. You can do things very, very affordably. And then I had kids, and it became, as I was navigating my career and working with it was everything going on, we realized that we wanted to pay for some of the extras because it made such a difference in our life. And so some of those extras, I mean, with my first, we breastfed for most of that maternity leave and into that first year. So that saved us significantly on formula costs. With my second, I didn't. The work was just too much for me. I couldn't breastfeed while I was doing that, so we had to pay almost an extra $100 a month in just formula costs, on top of the extra doctor or. We'll get to health insurance in a minute, but on top of the extra diaper costs and wipe costs and all of those things really add up. For us, it was almost several $100s a month of extra expenses that were tied to that. Now, could we have made that cheaper? Maybe. Probably, but it was just what fit with our life. And so being really just clear and honest with yourself about what does that look like? The next piece is really looking at, your health insurance. So making sure that you add your baby to your health insurance plan. Different companies are going to approach this differently, depending on where you're at. But it is something that you do need to obviously disclose. You need to get your baby on health insurance. But looking at also like how does that impact the cost, and that's going to vary widely. For some health insurance plans that we review, it's like spouse, or it's like individual and spouse, and then individual and family. And those are the three options. So if you have like 12 kids, it doesn't matter versus, one kid, it's going to be the same price. But others really do factor in how many kids you have as a total cost. And so it's just getting really clear on what is that cost going to look like for you, especially if you're going to be budgeting and this money is tight. Having kids, especially young kids, is one of the most, it's just a really financially stressful time. It's one of the biggest outflow times of your life. It can be. It doesn't have to be, certainly, but it can be when we look at that. And then another line item is, how are you going to be getting help and support? And this can just be, again, through family relationships. It can be through your friend network. It can be things like that, but also recognizing that you may need to get support from elsewhere. And so making sure that you're thinking about that as a line item for a budget. After Vivian, my second daughter, was born, we ended up hiring a housekeeper to come and help us once a month of just cleaning our house. And here's a secret, doing our laundry for us. It made such a difference for us in that space to be able to have that help and support for us. And that's going to look different for everyone, but just being really honest about like, what are these line items that you may want to be adding into your budget of looking at what this looks like. Now, the big item for so many people is childcare costs, of saying, okay, how much is this actually going to cost us to have somebody watch our kids? Now, there's a lot of different solutions, and this is what I love. This is what I love about women. This is what I love about families. I'm stuck on this idea of resiliency, and this is one of the best examples of resiliency that I have with people, is how they figure out how to make all of this work. And it's not just making it work when your kids are really young. It's like all throughout their life of having kids. We have this ability to figure out what needs to be done and make it happen. And so this is really where childcare is going to come into play. There's so many different options. We have done a variety of different things, just personally for childcare. Probably the first 6 months of my first daughter's life, we had no childcare. Both my husband and I were working from home. I obviously had maternity leave. He was working with me at the time, so he had a lot of flexibility as well. And we would just trade the baby off. We got her, she was a very good sleeper, which I know is not the case for everybody, but we got her really sleep trained really, really well. So I knew that I had several hours in my workday that she wasn't going to be awake. And then the times that she was awake, my husband and I were able to trade off. And then one of us would work in the evenings or get up earlier. We were able to navigate that well. So that's kind of what we did there. And then we went to having somebody from like probably 6 months to the first year. We knew her sleep schedule. She would wake up at 7 a.m., go to bed at 9 a.m., wake up at like 10:30, 11, and then be awake till like 1 or 2. And so we got that childcare from 11 to 1 or 2. And so we paid a friend to come over and watch her for those 3 hours. And we were able to get a significant amount of work done because we knew her schedule. Now, as with anything, those things don't last. And so it obviously transitioned into needing more, to where we started doing a nanny share with some friends of ours. So we ended up hiring somebody to do in-home childcare for us. And we had friends who needed childcare as well. And so we shared that cost. And it worked out for us to be cheaper than daycare. We also have a family member, my mother-in-law, who comes and watches her on Fridays. Now watches both girls on Fridays. And so we were able to kind of figure out what works. Our friend ended up moving away. And so now we have, we're paying for the full-time childcare. And that's just part of our budget. It's part of what we know that we need to spend in this season of our life. And as our girls and kids now will grow and change, we know that that's going to change and adapt. But it is a big piece. It's normal. I guess normal is probably the right way of saying that childcare oftentimes is more than somebody's mortgage. And I think that's okay for the season of life. That is very much kind of a piece of this. So figuring out your childcare. Now, one thing I want to point out is that oftentimes families will decide to have one parent stay at home, which is wonderful. I grew up with a stay-at-home mom and I absolutely loved it. And so the one just consideration is that there is a cost to that too. We look at this as oftentimes people are like, hey, this is going to be saving us money. And when I look at it, it's like, okay, perhaps, yes, in one regard. On another regard, it is actually costing you money because you're not bringing in income. You're not having career progression. You're losing some of that time in the workforce. Again, this is where personal finance is so personal. And what is best for you and your family, only you and your family can really decide that. But I do want, as that conversation with stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads or whatever that looks like for your family, that is a big consideration. Is the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost being, what are we missing out on from an income standpoint? It's not just the expenses that we cut; it's from the income and income growth standpoint as well. That's important. So it's on both sides of those. That is some of the tactical how to plan for our kids. This is going to be part one. We're going to have a part two where I'm going to talk about the different planning considerations that go beyond just the month-to-month budgeting of what having a kid looks like. So definitely, if you've listened to all this, you tracked all this, you're like, yes, okay, I need to go do these things. Stay tuned for this next episode because it's just as important, if not more important, of figuring out kind of the bigger picture, these financial planning aspects of having a baby that don't get talked about enough, that are absolutely critical. Hopefully they don't apply to you. But if they do, it can absolutely devastate a financial situation. So let's stay tuned. We'll bring that second part to you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of Everyday Money with Hannah Moore. If you like what you heard, subscribe and check out livewealthynow.com. We have a lot more resources to help you live wealthy now.